There's the type of person who will go and get jumped for 100 games and they'll like enjoy that because they're learning and they're seeing like where they can grow. And then there's the type of person who's like, well, I'm losing. I don't like losing. So I don't like it. Dodging is so deep in Overwatch that when your dodge is good, the enemy won't even know what happened. They'll wonder why they can't even hit you. Even pro players can be baffled by good dodge.
Bro, I can't hit the soldier. He's just standing still.
All that said, I think Rivals is a much better game than Overwatch right now. Alright, I'm going to give my thoughts on the Rivals Alpha. I think Rivals is undeniably an Overwatch clone. We can debate what a clone is, but it's pretty obvious their motivation was to cash in on the success of Overwatch, but make their own version. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we got to every game that we have. Every single game was an iteration on a previous game. It's completely fine to do that. It doesn't mean it can't be better than Overwatch or anything like that. But I think we're being deluded if we pretend that Rivals is somehow like not very, very heavily based on Overwatch, because almost every single ability in the game is like a direct port from Overwatch basically, and every hero in Rivals is basically just a combination of abilities from Overwatch with some changes here and there. And again, I think that's actually fine. You can just do that, and if you're improving on everything Overwatch did, then that's good. You're just making a better game, and that's fine. So anyway, I'm gonna look at what Overwatch did right, what it did wrong, and where Rivals has improved or done things worse or made the same mistakes. But first, who am I? Where am I coming from with this video? Well, I'm Devin. I'm the creator of the Overwatch 1v1 Discord server. I peaked top 100 in Marvel Rivals as a DPS player, and you might be thinking like, well, how many people were even in the alpha? Well, I calculated it was about 57,000, which is pretty good. That's not like insane, but you know, that's pretty up there. I was like, you know, playing with the best players and seeing what the meta was and everything. But I'm more well known for Soldier 1v1s in Overwatch. I'm the type of player who cares about deep mechanical skill, the type of thing that takes years to develop. I think the abilities and ultimates of hero shooters should exist to enhance the deep and rich gameplay of the FPS genre, rather than taking away from it. Gameplay which is dominated by pressing the right cooldown at the right time or simply not being in the wrong place or the wrong time, I think is one-dimensional and boring, and that's why I don't play MOBAs, and I don't think hero shooters should seek to emulate MOBA gameplay. A hero shooter should build upon the fundamentals of FPS gameplay instead of tearing them down. Hero abilities should introduce new aim, dodge, and positioning challenges rather than simply constraining the options of the opponent, nullifying their effort, or reducing your own mechanical requirements. Aim and dodge skills, which take thousands of hours to master, should never be countered by the flowchart decision-making gameplay of gimmicky MOBA-style abilities which take only tens of hours to learn at best. And if you don't care about mechanics at all, I don't think this type of design is good for you either, because skill checks are still going to exist. You're probably going to get farmed by a Widow and think hit scan's overpowered because you don't care about dodging. It's frustrating for all parties. We don't have to agree on what is more deep or more meaningful in a video game. I think, very good reasons for what I think, and you might have good reasons for what you think, and we don't have to agree on it, and you can keep watching if you want, or if you think it's going to be stupid, then you can just click off right now. Okay, so why is Overwatch a good game at all? Probably the main reason Overwatch has such a large appeal is the aim and movement. If you're not an aim player, you might think that sounds wrong, but the movement in Overwatch feels very snappy, very responsive. There's a wide variety of types of movement. The movement abilities are generally very like interesting to use and play against. And that means that it's very fun to shoot in the game because you're shooting against really interesting movement. So that's really where Overwatch shines. That means the instant ground excel is very important because your dodge options are very, very large. Like you can short strafe, you can mid strafe, you can long strafe, you can metronome, you can do erratic strafes, you can stand still and time your dodge, you can wall lick, you can air lick, sometimes you can make a jump work, especially versus projectiles. Dodging is so deep in Overwatch that when your dodge is good, the enemy won't even know what happened. They'll wonder why they can't even hit you. Even pro players can be baffled by good dodge.
Bro, I can't hit the soldier. He's just standing still. Oh my god.
Aimer7 once said, and this is to paraphrase, he kind of just put it in a tier list actually, but he said basically Overwatch is the most difficult to aim in, but it's also the game in which you're rewarded the least for good aim. So that's kind of the like double-edged sword of Overwatch. Overwatch made it really fun to aim in the game, but then being really good at aim almost gets you nothing in Overwatch. So one other thing that's really good about Overwatch is the small hitboxes. It might not be immediately obvious why that's true, but smaller hitboxes means a higher precision requirement, which means there's more options for dodge. There's more skill between the person shooting and the person dodging, and obviously that works both ways. And the wider hitboxes are, the more forgiving it is, the less it matters what you choose to do with both your aim and your dodge. So why is Overwatch an awful game? Well, the game is extremely gimmick dominated. There are tons and tons of press this button to win the fight abilities, which are based only on when you chose to press the button, like a MOBA or an RPG, with minimal or zero mechanical skill requirements. So for example, hook, anti-nade, mag-nade, and then to a lesser extent things, almost every hero has one, like Soldier's Helix. They're just extremely easy to land, and they often just nullify any player skill from the opponent. So if you get hit by hook, for example, realistically, you couldn't have possibly dodged it unless you have a movement ability to counter it. Like if you were just trying to use the basic skill of dodge, the fundamental dodge skill, which you've been practicing for thousands of hours, that won't get you anywhere there. The thing you have to do to not get hit by hook is you have to just not be within 20 meters of the hog. He's going to be behind a corner, he's going to jump out and pre-fire his hook, and he's just going to flick as he's jumping out, and it's just going to hit you. And if you back around a corner, half the time it's just going to pull you around the corner. It's not even going to break on the corner like it's supposed to. There's basically no dodge element there unless you have a movement ability, and it's just extremely one-dimensional and boring. And then for less egregious examples like Helix, it's still, I would say, a very big problem because it takes a matchup which would otherwise be very, very skill-based, like soldier versus soldier, and it turns it into just who landed the better Helix, which is largely up to luck because it's a projectile. And obviously projectiles have a very large element of luck inherent to them. And I fully believe, and I think it's actually obvious, that this was all an intentional design decision on the part of Blizzard. They wanted to give players the ability to get luck-based and low-skill elims because it gives low-skill players a hit of dopamine. That sounds like very cynical or elitist or something, but I think it's like actually kind of obvious that that's true. Because if the game were like Vamp or LG 1v1 where it's just the better player always wins, then worse players, like I was saying, low-skill players, are going to just lose 100 games in a row and they're just going to quit because they're babies. And like that sounds very harsh, but that's like literally true. There's the type of person who will go and get shit stomped for 100 games and they'll like enjoy that because they're learning and they're seeing like where they can grow. And then there's the type of person who's like, well, I'm losing. I don't like losing. So I don't like it. And they just need these low skill, low effort ways to win against better players. And that, I mean, I know a lot of people are just going to disagree with that, but I think it's kind of obvious. And I guarantee in the Blizzard, they have like their onboard psychologist, and their psychologist is like, you're going to sell more skins if you give worse players better ways to win. I guarantee it. It's definitely true. So anyway, obviously the game can't be as skill-based as a Vamp 1v1 where the better player always wins. But Blizzard deliberately goes in the opposite direction. They try as hard as possible to make sure the game has as many factors as possible that are outside of your control to allow worse players to win. I think anyone who's played a lot of Overwatch knows this is true, and a lot of people grew up on Overwatch, and they don't understand how bad that is. Not every game is like that. You don't have to have it be like that. It doesn't have to be that way. You can make a game good. It's very possible. There's been good games before. So another problem with Overwatch is tanks are really boring to play, and they only exist to ruin the game for other people. A lot of people, when I say this for the first time, are like, wow, I never thought of it that way. But think about Defense Matrix. Think about Doomfist, especially like in the current meta. It's really obvious that Doomfist, you know, he just slams behind you, he punches you into his team, and then you're like, well, I can't be on this hero anymore. I have to swap because he's doing that, and there's literally nothing anyone can do about it. I'd put Sigma on this list because he literally just deletes everything you do. He just has a shield, and then he has Absorb, and he can just delete everything you do all the time. If he hits a rock, you just get one shot, so he denies a lot of space. He can poke you from really far away, etc. So it's not like they gave tools to let the tank do anything interesting. They just gave the tank tools to completely shut down someone on the enemy team. You could argue that's not true with Ball and Doomfist. I mean, for sure, it's not. What I just said isn't exactly true for those two heroes. But if you look at what happens in practice with those two heroes, it's like, okay, I'm going to go on the flank. Oh, but they have a Ball. If the Ball literally does anything to me, I'm just going to die. So I can't go on the flank anymore. That eliminates, what, 90% of the map from being playable? It's just ridiculous. These heroes are so unfun to play against. And then when you're playing as them, you're so fucking bored because they're so mechanically unskillful. You literally just press your button. All you're doing is you're making these MOBA type decisions where it's just positioning on the map and cooldown management in ult management and things like that. That's why no one wants to play tank. No one wanted to play tank in Overwatch 1. No one wants to play tank in Overwatch 2. In Blizzard, they think if they just keep making tanks more and more overpowered, they're somehow going to fix this issue. But they completely are totally oblivious that people don't not want to play tank because tanks get shot in the head or whatever. They don't want to play tank because it's boring, because you don't do anything on tank. You just hold your right click to negate what the enemy player did. You don't have anything that's high skill ceiling for yourself to do. So another problem with Overwatch that's been a problem for Overwatch almost the whole time, and they actually kind of fixed it in Season 9 a little bit, but healing is way too strong in Overwatch. It's almost impossible to kill anyone without burst damage, so that has made the game very dominated and reliant on characters that can just insta-kill people, like Widow, Hanzo, and there's like niche examples like Ryan Charge can get kills, and then like Junkrat can get combo kills. But it's always these like unexpected, kind of unpredictable, you're just suddenly dead things. If you know the Widow's there, you're not going to die to her. You can, if you're good at dodge, you can just dodge the Widow. Even a pro Widow, you'll just dodge the Widow. And if you know they're there and you don't have really good dodge, you can just hide behind a corner. It's just the Widow gets you by surprise and you're just suddenly dead. Same with Hanzo, same with like all of these things. If it's a soldier, you should pretty much never die to the soldier unless your team has already lost the fight, because if soldier's shooting you, just fucking walk away. Just go around a corner. And the reason it all works that way is because damage doesn't matter in Overwatch. The only thing that matters is going to 0 HP. So, and this is because healing is so fucking strong. You can be doing, max optimal damage as soldier, and you're never going to kill anyone because they're just going to get healed back to full in a split second if they go around a corner. Okay, so I've covered all of I think the biggest issues with Overwatch. There's lots of little issues, like, well, I don't know if I'd actually call this a little issue, like railings. Why? Why do railings block shots? Why can't you just walk through railings? What is wrong with Blizzard? But I don't want to rant about every single thing in Overwatch, so let's move on. What does Rivals do worse than Overwatch? Rivals doesn't have instant ground movement. So it not only feels slow and clunky, it has far fewer dodge options because of ground excel, and just you can't even crouch in Rivals for some fucking reason. So short strafes are just awful, useless. You can't short strafe at all, basically. You just won't even move because of the ground excel. You can't stand still and time a dodge like you can versus like a Hanzo or a Widow because the excel is too slow. So all you can really do are mid-length and long-length strafes. So that's boring. Destructible environments. It's like when they made Marvel Rivals, they were like, how can we innovate on the hero shooter genre to solve non-issues, instead of thinking about how to innovate to actually solve problems with Overwatch, the game they're obviously copying off of. Destructible environments, they're just bad. Like, not conceptually, like you can conceptually have destructible environments be fun, but I can't think of a single person who was ever like, well, because of the destructible environment, this cool thing happened. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's just annoying. It's just annoying for the map to be changing, frankly. Like, you don't want the map to be inconsistent. You want to be able to rely on certain walls and corners and all of that stuff. Rivals has no heal passive. Like in Overwatch, they finally added a passive self-heal for all heroes. I think they should have done that like 7-8 years ago, because it was obvious, in my opinion. But they eventually did it. And then Rivals didn't copy that. Why would you not copy that? Whatever. And then some abilities in Rivals are actually even more poorly designed than the ones in Overwatch. For example, everyone hates Bap's Immo for obvious reasons, but they made an even more overpowered one where Loki Instead of throwing down one lamp, he throws down 3, and if you stand in it, you can't even take damage. It's not just that it's good, it's that there's no skill involved. It's just like, oh, he threw down lamp. I'm going to shoot his lamps. And it's even worse than that, because in practice, you don't even want to shoot the lamps because it takes too long. It's so bad. It's so bad. And then there's other things like Luna Snow's ult is like Trance, but stronger than Trance. And it's like, Trance is kind of fine. It's an ult, and it's like a really strong heal. There's lots of ways to play around Trance. It doesn't stop people from getting one-hit kills and stuff like that. But in Rivals, you don't really have any options to kill anyone inside Luna's ult, because you don't have Widow, you don't have these one-shot abilities, which I think is a good thing. But if you don't have these one-shot abilities, how are you ever going to kill someone inside a Luna ult? It's almost impossible. And then you have other things like Rocket Raccoon's res is like a Mercy res, but there's 0 risk for anyone involved. The Rocket Raccoon doesn't have to like walk up to the corpse to res them. They just automatically fucking respawn at his like beacon thing, and it's like, that's so over the top, like too good. So another thing Rivals did worse is hero combos. I think they're just bad conceptually because they just constrain your team comps. It's like, okay, I'm playing Punisher, and Punisher has this combo with Rocket Raccoon where my rifle is way better when he uses his buff on me. If Punisher were good without Rocket Raccoon, he's just overpowered when you do have a Rocket Raccoon. So there's like no win here in terms of balance or anything. It just forces specific combos, and it's just not fun. And the combo abilities themselves aren't fun either. They're too good, and they just fuck the game up, in my opinion. Like the Magneto Scarlet combo, he just 2-shots squishies with his left click from range. It's like, can you not do that? It's sad because it's so much more bearable than what Overwatch is. Like every day I log on Overwatch, I'm like, oh my god, please give me Rivals back. But there's some really stupid stuff in Rivals too. It's just much more bearable because it's so much more limited that you can play around it more. And then season buffs. These are buffs that characters get for the whole season without being a hero combo thingy. Conceptually, I think they're fine to give like minor buffs to like spice up the meta or whatever. As implemented in Rivals, it's really bad because they're way too strong. So for example, Hela got 15% damage for her season buff, which changed her breakpoints, so she could 2-tap people, and normally she'd have to 3-tap people. So it completely changed the balance of the game, like massively. Another one is Groot had 200 extra HP. So instead of 700, he had 900 or something like that. But it was like, are you kidding? He has 200 extra HP. Just because of the season buff, and it made it Groot meta when normally maybe he wouldn't be meta because that's such a giant buff. Okay, so all that said, I think Rivals is a much better game than Overwatch right now, which is kind of sad because Rivals is in alpha, or was in alpha, and it's horribly optimized and was, I'd say, borderline unplayable because of how unoptimized it was, but it was still much more fun than Overwatch. And it's because Overwatch did so many things wrong, and Rivals got a few of them better. So for one, in Rivals, tanks aren't designed around ruining the game for other people. They're more about playing their own game and getting value, by controlling the map, doing damage, pressuring, having good ability usage, stuff like that. Not just like, oh, that player's doing too good, so I'm going to pick this tank that completely nullifies them, completely deletes them from the game. That's not what rival tanks are like. So there's no defense matrix, there's no ball, there's no Doomfist, there's no hog. There's things like Doctor Strange. He's most similar to Ryan, for sure. But the thing is, he's even less obnoxious than Ryan and more fun, because where does Ryan become obnoxious? It's when he has free reign to just like charge across the map and just start swinging, and everyone's just running away from him because your comp isn't built to deal with a Ryan doing that. That's a thing that happens in high elo, but like, believe it or not, I don't know if you've been there, but Doctor Strange doesn't have hammer. He has a ranged attack. It's a projectile, so he can poke. He has more flexibility than Ryan. Ryan, if he's stuck at long range, can't do a single thing except throw his Fire Strike, which is, another stupid ability. Doctor Strange can poke with pretty good damage. He's got a pretty strong melee, but it's not like overwhelming. And he can do animation cancel with his left click, which is cool. So he can chain his left clicks out and do more damage and stuff, which gives him a little bit more depth. So he's a little bit more like Sig in some ways, but the thing is, he's also not like Sig, where Sig can just absorb infinite damage. Doctor Strange isn't like that. He has to actually play corners. His shield can block a lot of damage, but it's like you have to pick and choose when to use it and all that stuff. He's like just a more interesting character to play and play against. And it's true for all the tanks, I think, in Rivals. Like Groot controls the map. He doesn't just punish an enemy player for existing. He puts up a bunch of walls, and a lot of people think the walls are like too good or whatever, but in my opinion, they weren't really. If your team just focus fires the walls down, it wasn't a big deal. Which I would agree is kind of bad game design, but to a much lesser degree than any of the other problems I've mentioned, because that's the problem where you shouldn't design anything that relies on your whole team to play right for it to not be a problem. But, you know, Overwatch would never even come close to meeting that standard. That'd be a ridiculous standard for Overwatch. So another thing that Rivals did way, way better than Overwatch is there's way, way fewer gimmicky, low skill, like insta-kill, just fight controlling abilities. Like, there's no anti-need that just you throw it on the tank and, we don't have a Suzu, so we just lose the fight. Technically there's a sleep dart equivalent, but it's much harder to land than sleep dart is. You know, sleep dart is so easy to land if you know how to use it, if you just aim legs. And sleep dart's just going to be insta-kill almost every time, whereas the sleep equivalents in Rivals don't result in a kill nearly as often. There's no like hook, there's no defense matrix, there's no magnade. There are some gimmicky stupid abilities in Rivals, but there's just way fewer. So it's much, much more bearable, and it's a lot easier to avoid the gimmicks because you're not just overwhelmed with them constantly. So in Rivals, it feels like mechanics kind of matter a lot more. It's like I can aim and dodge, so that gives me a lot of power in this game, and that's just fun. You know, you work to improve at skills, and you get rewarded for those skills. And Overwatch obviously doesn't really work like that. So what did Rivals make the same mistakes as Overwatch with? Well, tanks are still boring to play. I said Doctor Strange is more fun than Ryan. That's definitely true. I'd say Groot's more fun than Overwatch tanks. Like, overall, Rivals tanks are a little bit better than Overwatch tanks in terms of how fun they are to play and play against. But the bottom line with tanks is that they're unmechanical, and that makes them shallow, and that's true in Rivals and it's true in Overwatch. They're basically just fatter DPS with more HP. They can't dodge and they can't aim. Every single tank that was in the alpha was a projectile hero, and projectiles are always going to be unfun and unrewarding because they lack precision, so they just have a large inherent element of luck. Anytime you're just like, I'm shooting this ability and I hope it lands. Oh, it landed. That's not fun. I don't care if I got a kill because I just happened to headshot someone with a Hanzo arrow. That's just lame.
If you made it this far into the video, tell me if you prefer cats or dogs and which breed.
Another thing that Rivals didn't improve. Melee heroes still don't require any aim. All they have to do is get range of view and left click. This is just like MOBA type gameplay. It's just, are you standing in the wrong place? If so, you lose. That's really boring. And it's if you don't lose for standing in the wrong place, then the melee hero is just too weak. They're just underpowered. And that was the case in the alpha. Spider-Man, Black Panther, what's there another melee DPS that was underpowered? Magic was playable. She was decent. And honestly, she wasn't too annoying to play against at her strength in the alpha, because it was interesting to shoot at her. And although her damage on you was literally zero skill, I played a few games as Magic, and it's literally just mash your abilities to do damage. I'm not saying her decision making is that simple, but her doing damage is extremely shallow. And that's true for all the melee characters, even Spider-Man, who on its surface is like, oh, it's a combo hero, but you just hit your abilities in the right order and you do your max damage. So the problem is they're either going to be underpowered or they're going to be extremely unfun to play against. It's one or the other, because you can't dodge them. So there's no counterplay once they get close to you. It's just a major obvious problem with a melee hero in a game. See, Genji kind of got around this by making his right click really hard to land, like land 3 in the head. But then, of course, in Season 9, they made it so shurikens are the size of a planet, and he just one-taps you every time he gets close to you. But That's besides the point. So where can NetEase learn from Blizzard's mistakes? Besides everything I just said, there's several things I would say here. One, don't fixate on hero win rates. A hero can be busted in niche situations, but weak overall. Not every hero has to be good all the time. The fact that you can swap heroes means it's okay to make some heroes niche. A great example of that in Overwatch would be Junkrat. He's supposed to be an area denial hero that can flush people out of positions and controls like corridors and stuff like that. But they overbuffed his mobility and his ability to like assassinate people so much you can just play him all the time. He's not like a strong hero in that his win rate isn't high because if he tries to dive you, it's like 50-50. It's like if I notice he's coming, I'll just kill him. But if he lands directly on top of my head with his rollout, I'm just going to die. It's very, very uninteresting, unfun gameplay when you take a niche hero and you try to make them good all the time, like a 50% win rate type of thing. In a game where you can swap heroes, there is no excuse to not have your niche heroes just stay niche heroes. So another thing they can learn from Blizzard's mistakes is don't make tanks overpowered. Making a hero overpowered doesn't make it fun to play. People want a deep and rich experience playing their hero. If you want people to have fun playing a hero, instead of making it stronger, make it deeper. Take their boring mechanic, like their Reinhardt swing, for example, where you literally just hold left click and if they're in range, it hits them, and add something to it to make it deeper. For example, make a sweet spot in the range. If you're exactly correct space, it does more damage, and if you're slightly wrong space, it does slightly less damage. Stuff like that. Give the player something to do when they're playing the game. Another one would be like example with Reinhardt is his shield. There's nothing fun about using the shield. Give a reason that when the Rein is using his shield, he's having fun. Make it deeper. So another thing would be don't saturate the game with one-shots. And especially don't saturate it with luck-based one-shots like projectiles like Hanzo. I would argue Widow is the least grave offender here because if you have very good dodge, you can pretty much always dodge the Widow, or at least let's say like 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 19 out of 20 times. Even if it's like an Overwatch League level Widow, if your dodge is really good, you're not really that worried about getting headshot by the Widow most of the time. But if it's a Hanzo, it doesn't really matter how you dodge because he's not really aiming at you. He's just aiming somewhere near you and he's just hoping it hits. And then like 1 out of 10 times or whatever, it just happens to hit your head. And that's not because he's good and it's not because you're bad. It's because he's shooting projectiles and no one can predict if it's going to hit or not. So also don't saturate the game with cringe low skill abilities. The more deterministic a skill-based an ability is, the stronger it should be. Like Helix should be weaker than like Storm's right click. See, there's an example where Rivals did something better, kind of. Storm has a right click and it's a hit scan ability. And her left click is a projectile. So she kind of has a cooldown that is stronger than her normal attack and is hit scan, which is like the opposite of what they would do in Overwatch, where they would have your left click is the high skill thing that gets less value, and they make your right click a cooldown, which is a projectile, which is lower skill, it gets more value. So it's good to avoid that. And then finally, this one's kind of nuanced. Don't saturate the game with heroes who dominate space too much, like actually dominate it. For example, like just the you let me get close so you auto lose type characters. Like Venture would be a great example, like a great modern example. Like if Venture sneaks up on you, you just die. There's nothing. I mean, you might have a get out of free jail card ability, which, you know, that's really lame. That if that's the reason you live, it's because of your cringe low skill ability. But there's a lot of examples of this in Overwatch. Like Junkrat, obviously, if you get really close to a Junkrat, you just die. You just auto lose. Ana is one that a lot of like lower skill players don't realize. Ana is like Junkrat in that if you get really close to an Ana, you just auto lose unless you have, you know, cringe low skill abilities to counter her cringe low skill abilities. She will just aim a sleep dart at your legs and it's going to hit like 80% plus and then you're just dead. And if she misses that, she has anti-need, which almost guarantees you die as well, unless you're like on Tracer, you know. So There's a lot of heroes like that in Overwatch, and like there's the opposite of close range. There's long range, where it's like, think of all the open long range spaces like Junkertown, where it's just dominated by Widow or maybe Hanzo, stuff like that, because they control that long range so much compared to other heroes. There's like limited counterplay, and in Overwatch that's largely damage fall off thing. Like if there were no damage fall off, Kree would be able to challenge Widow cross map, but because the damage fall off is so ridiculous, Kree literally headshots, I think it's 40 damage at max range, maybe it's like 42, something like that. Ridiculous damage fall off. So a Kree would never be able to challenge a Widow at 40 meters. It's really bad. It's very one-dimensional, very bad. That's something to definitely be careful about adding to the game. Okay, so what is the outlook for Rivals? For me, I'm honestly not super optimistic for Rivals long term, because I think they don't quite understand what makes Overwatch so bad, and they only kind of lucked into making Rivals temporarily way better than Overwatch. I'm guessing later they're going to add a bunch of more gimmicky heroes that ruin the game. Something a lot of people have been saying, kind of joking about, maybe just being serious, is that they're just baiting FPS players into playing the game by making hit scan playable right now, and then later they're gonna just make more gimmicky heroes and buff all the gimmicky heroes and just make hit scan miserable to play. I really hope that's not the case. I really hope they have some understanding of why Overwatch is a miserable game, and they try to not make the same mistakes that Blizzard made. And then there's also the problem that the game is developed by NetEase, which only makes pay-to-win mobile games. This isn't necessarily a guarantee they're going to do the same with Marvel Rivals. Obviously, Marvel is a huge IP, and they might, the bigwigs from Marvel or whatever might demand that the game not be trash. They're trying to cash in on the success of Overwatch, and they can't really do that if they make it pay-to-win, like a trash pay-to-win mobile type game. But you never know until release. I didn't see any hints that it would go that way in alpha. There was no infrastructure in the UI to suggest that it would go that way. I don't really think it's going to go that way, honestly. Like, I could be completely wrong, but I don't think it's going to be pay to win. I think they're going to try to make it like Overwatch as much as possible. I just think they're probably going to make the same mistakes that Blizzard made and ruin the game later, but I really hope that's not the case. So what do you think? Tell me in the comments below.